The NCG Golf Podcast is sponsored by Golf Clubs for Cash, Europe's leading retailer of great value pre-owned golf equipment. Choose from woods, irons, putters, bags and more. With over 40,000 items in stock and more than 50,000 5-star Trustpilot reviews, you're sure to find what you need at Golf Clubs for Cash. Shop our website, download our app or visit our stores in Edinburgh and Warrington.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the NCG Golf Podcast. I am your regular host, Tom Irwin, and I'm joined by my chilly and headphone-wearing colleague, Steve Carroll. Right?
I don't like winter, Tom.
You don't look like you like winter.
I'm not a fan of the cold. Although I'm trying to cheer myself up by saying that every day that passes is a day closer to spring.
Oh, I like it, yeah. How many days is it till Masters?
I saw a thing that said it was under 100 or 100 the other day, so we're into the countdown has firmly begun.
Oh, isn't it? Is that my jumper?
I don't know what it is, and listeners will be none the wiser either.
It is Stream Song.
Oh, you went and merched up, did you?
Yeah. Have you seen that Your Golf Traveller have pinched your research?
The internet is a crazy place.
I think you should take it as a compliment that someone is watching our social and thought, that was a good post, I'll have that. I think it's probably a bit much that the fact they've photoshopped out our logo, that said.
You're quite keen on getting stuck in now on the internet, haven't you? Have you taken them to task?
No, I just said, this must have taken you ages to put together, well done.
Oh, Sarky voice.
Yeah. It's a good point you make, though, because you can play. So basically, Steve did a graphic for social media that was to promote the research done on the cost of golf at top 100 venues, GB&I top 100 venues, which in the main are a lot higher than they used to be. There's been some significant inflation, particularly at the top end, largely driven by American tourists. But you can still play a lot of these places for very, very good value on our top 100 tour. You can certainly get on the likes of Lytham, Cabo Highlands, a lot of these trophy venues at exceptionally good prices when compared to the rack rate green fee on the NCG Top 100s tour. So do go and check that out, and listeners to this podcast are able to claim a 10% discount by using code podcast10. It's good, wasn't it?
Well read.
So today we're going to talk about the death of etiquette. And we've certainly seen the death of etiquette in Your Golf Travel's behaviour by pinching our post and not crediting us, which is definitely counter to what you're supposed to do online, but we'll let them off. We're going to talk less about social media etiquette and more about etiquette at golf clubs, whether that's still a thing, whether it's become an outdated concept, whether the concept of etiquette has shifted from one set of rules to another, perhaps. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about our mailbag and the type of things that you've been saying to us on social media, the type of things you've been writing in to say. Steve is still allowed to host this bit. So what have you got for us, Steve?
Well, we've been doing a lot about WHS, haven't we? So no surprise that our postbag has been dominated by people talking about last week's pod and the pieces that have started to appear on our website, nationalclubgolfer.com, and on social media. Some of the natives are restless, Tom.
Well, so last week we basically discussed the findings of our WHS survey. The survey itself was a thing that a lot of people have been calling for. We've had a lot of people in the run-up to us doing the survey say, why does nobody ask us what we think? Why do the RNA not publish the results of their survey? So we kind of thought, well, we'll do our own. We got nearly 3,500 responses. The responses that we did get were certainly very, very enlightening, and led to an easy conversation through the results last week. You've been posting articles on our website that take more of a deep dive into some of those specific comments. And obviously people have been having their say, haven't they, on the results of that survey?
Yes. Let's take out the people who say we're writing too much stuff about WHS, of which there are a few.
Really?
Yeah. As I said, the natives are restless.
Well, it's been our top performing podcast, certainly of the last 10.
Give the people what they want. That's what I say. I find the reaction to numbers particularly interesting just before we get into the postbag. So people can shift the numbers however many ways they want. And I've been accused on social media, not on social media, certainly in our comments and on email of twisting the numbers, particularly in relation to what people thought about Kongu. But it's interesting how you can interpret numbers in the very different ways in which people do it. I mean, my overall feeling about the survey results was they're fairly contradictory and they're a pretty mixed bag. For me, people can't seem to work out whether they like it or dislike it. There's bits of it that they like, there's bits of it they don't like, and then you say, well, what would you return to Congo? Oh yeah. 29% said yeah, 28% said yeah with modernisation. But hang on, didn't you just say that you thought that WHS was slightly better or much better? So I suppose from my point of view, it's a bit unreasonable of me to suggest people to have coherent views on WHS when everything that we've seen in our survey shows that they don't have coherent views on WHS. Particularly, it's a mixed bag, isn't it? People are all over the shop with what they think about it.
Well, I took from it that people are quite like the system, but they don't like the fact it's manipulable if those two things can be separated. So I think there was a consensus that WHS is more manipulatable than Kongu was. And they definitely don't like that aspect of it. What was interesting, I don't think there is an outpouring of negativity about the concept of 8 from 20. I think it's more when you start discussing the specifics of general play scores counting and the credibility of those scores versus a sort of a composition only model where people start to dislike it.
Yeah. Should we get into some of the things that people have said? That's the point of a postbag, I suppose. Phil said, I personally like the system. However, doing a straw poll with players, I know they say they don't like it because they don't understand how it works. They play golf once a week with their mates at the same club and aren't bothered about slope or course rating. Also, with the old system, they knew if they're having a bad day, they could just NR and go up 0.1. That was easy for them. I think that's fair enough, actually.
Well, I think they're definitely in the fondness for the Kongu system that people have. That idea of kind of grinding away to try and make buffer zone and the movement in your handicap being absolutely, definitely linked to your performance on that day. That was very clear, wasn't it? And you now do have a system where a good or a bad round does not necessarily impact your handicap in the same direction. So you can have a particularly good round and see your handicap go up just due to the vagaries of it knocking out a worse round from previously or a better round from previously in that example. So I think that is confusing for people and it often is sort of counterintuitive.
Also, as much as I like the flexibility of how your handicap moves from course to course, it is true that the vast majority of golfers that we know, core club golfers, play at one club largely and don't move around, and therefore slope rating doesn't have the same impact on them perhaps, and course rating doesn't have the same impact on them that it does for me, where I play a number of different courses every year and I see my handicap move among them. So, yeah. Paul said, I enjoyed your latest podcast regarding the WHS. There were some great points raised. Thank you, Paul. We honestly didn't pay you to say that. He said, I've been playing golf for 60 years and I've a handicap of 8.2. In my opinion, WHS has ruined competitive golf for low handicap golfers. In my club, you need to score 8 to 10 shots under your handicap to win. There's no incentive to improve anymore as people are successful playing badly. I'm giving a shot a hole head start to many players in their prime. My options now are stop playing competitive golf, compete with no hope of winning, or play rubbish on purpose to get a higher handicap, which would never happen, he says in brackets. Unfortunately, my preferred option is just to stop playing comps, which I've done all winter, and plan on just social golf this season. A real shame after all these years playing. I believe WHS was brought in to grow the business, not to make golf fairer. I definitely think WHS was brought in to widen the pool of players. I think that's fairly self-evident.
It's certainly one of the motivators. I mean, the first thing you have to say is fair play to Paul, who presumably is in his late 60s or early 70s and is still playing single figures. That's quite the effort, isn't it? I think that there's quite a bit to what he said there. Like this kind of you hear this argument quite a lot, don't you, about the incentive to improve has been removed due to the advent of WHS. But I mean, I have some problem with that, because that you could argue that about the handicap system full stop. Like that is definitely true under Kongu as well, where if you were being competitive off 14, a handicap of 14, then why would you want that handicap to be any lower and therefore make you less competitive? So I think that is handicaps really. But then it has become kind of en vogue to sort of jump on board with the narrative that WHS is making it worse. And that's where I think there's a grey area as whether that's actually real or not.
I mean, I've done a piece looking at 2 separate clubs, 2 competition seasons across 2 years. I've compared that to the numbers of people within handicap categories released by England Golf. You can go and look at this piece online. Obviously, it's just 2 clubs. It's around 50 competitions around 2 years. But the number of people in the handicap categories who won were basically the same as the number of people within those handicap categories, if that makes sense. So,
yeah, I also think that one of the kind of bits of logic that I think is getting lost is that there's a lot of noise of people saying they don't want social rounds to count towards handicap, because I think they think that people are going to be able to lower their handicap in this sort of less formal environment. There's going to be less rigor applied to the application of the rules. There might be people giving gimmies, et cetera, et cetera. So the net result of that is that handicap should go down, not up. And therefore, the numbers of high handicaps, in inverted commas, winning competitions should go down. So I find that they're quite counterintuitive arguments to make, to say social golf shouldn't count towards handicap because it's going to lead to high handicappers winning competitions. I don't see how one argument follows the other particularly.
Well, again, I mean, Colin says something similar. I don't understand how you can put in a general play round, which is effectively a bounce game with your mates, and this counts towards your handicap. Surely only competition rounds should be accepted to handicap purposes. I keep saying this on podcasts. I keep saying it on pieces. You have to divorce the two now. They're separate. They were the same. Competition and handicaps were the same. They're not now. And I'm sure we could get some numbers from the number of people who have handicaps versus the number of people who play in competitions, and it'll be far more people have handicaps than playing competitions.
Yeah,
that's what it is now. I'm not saying that's good or bad or whatever. That's just how it is.
And it does seem that is the direction of travel, that we might end up with people having 2 numbers, that they've got their playing handicap and then they've got a competition handicap, which is only considering their scores from marked cards, competition rounds.
Ty said, you guys have made it repeatedly clear that you don't like the WHS. This poll shows that 71.8% of golfers either don't care or are positive, and only 28.2% are negative. And if we ignore neutrals, then 43.8% are positive, so more than half as many, again, than are negative. So maybe a sign to dial it back a bit on the anti-WHS take and constant pandering to scratch golfers. I think I've said quite clearly there's quite a lot about WHS that I like.
It is strange, isn't it, that? I mean...
But it is easier to manipulate. That is a fact.
We are basically the BBC, surely, aren't we? In that we get
we definitely are, yeah.
We get an equal number of people telling us that we are the mouthpieces of the governing bodies and we should stop sponsoring things like WHS. And we get an equal number of people saying that we are beating WHS with a stick unnecessarily. So hopefully it means we're getting it about right in terms of the balance.
How many more? We've got a lot. I could fill a podcast with this. So how many more do you want to do?
No, I think we should probably leave it there, but I think we should maybe come back to it in a future episode. I think the sort of noise will keep coming, won't it, as you publish more pieces that kind of expose some more of the specifics of that data. One thing about discussing data on a podcast is you do end up reeling out a load of numbers. A lot easier for people to digest that by looking at it on a website. So would encourage you, if you've got a kind of foot in this camp, or if you've got a dog in this fight, go and have a look at some of the stuff that Steve is producing as a result of that survey, because I think it is quite eye-opening.
It's not boring. We're going to keep doing it. Sorry.
It's not boring if you're into it, is it? So I think if we just move on to today then, to WHS is a way in which golf has changed a lot in the last 5 years. It's materially changed the way that our handicaps are calculated. And we seem to be living through this period of change in golf. we've had this post-COVID boom in participation, and we can argue about whether that boom has taken place in golf course scenarios or in off-course scenarios. But what I think is undoubted is that we're seeing a more diverse group of people playing golf. We're seeing people with more diverse ways in which they enjoy themselves, more diverse requirements at golf facilities down the country. And I wanted to talk about this and the sort of death of etiquette. So etiquette is a word that is kind of intrinsically attached to golf, right? It's a word that I don't think I really use apart from when I'm describing behaviour at golf courses. And I think what we're beginning to see is scenarios where we're arriving at golf clubs and people have got music playing from a Bluetooth speaker on a buggy. You certainly see that in the States. We're seeing people wearing clothes that are not your traditional sort of Farrah trousers and chinos and smart dress shoes and a collared shirt. And we're seeing that much more frequently. We've got scoring on our phones now. So if we were doing this podcast 5 or 6 years ago, we'd have been talking about whether phones should be allowed on golf courses. But now we've been asked to record scores in phones. So even in the kind of presence of music, the types of dress that people are wearing, the use of mobile phones, we're seeing like an entirely different way of consuming golf, which is at odds with what would previously have been regarded as kind of good behavior or acceptable behavior on a golf course. And that is before you get into a lot of the things that we as kids would sort of take for granted in terms of what are good manners around safety and the maintenance of the course. So things like replacing divots, repairing pitch marks, allowing the group in front to play through, a faster moving group to play through, whereabouts you wheel your trolley, whereabouts you walk. A lot of these things we were sort of taught as kids, as people who came to the game early, that this was just a way of behaving that was expected. And they become sort of something that is innate in you. And I don't think that's necessarily true of some of the newer golfers who are coming to the game maybe later in life, or they're returning to it after several years away. They don't have that built-up knowledge of what is expected in golf environments.
That's quite an opening statement.
Well, which bit of it?
Well, all of it, really. I'm sure we're going to get into decline, and I'm sure we're going to get into specific instances of decline and various bits and bobs around, as you say, music, dress codes. I mean, I think has etiquette declined over the last half a dozen years? Yes, definitely, in terms of things that you see out on the golf course. But etiquette's a funny thing, isn't it? I often used to think when I was a more rousing youngster playing golf is that etiquette was essentially a golf club's way of imposing control and making you do things that they wanted to do. And you often hear, whenever etiquette is brought up, you hear their club, their rules, right? That's quoted at you all of the time. And I think you are right that there is a definite new breed of player that isn't as interested in conforming, perhaps in the way that older generations did. If you take your core club golfer now, right, 50s and 60s, they've come from an environment where everything was set out before them. You wear this, you don't wear this, you do this, you don't do this, and so on and so forth. And that was the game. I mean, you used to go into golf clubs, didn't you? And there were signs up saying, no, basically. You remember the old picture, don't you? It's still in some golf clubs, sort of wrinkled away at the edges, of the two golfers, the one that you can wear this stuff and the one that you can't wear this stuff. But life has evolved, and like golf fashion, I mean, I don't want to get deep into it yet because we're still opening statements, but golf fashion has changed so much that some of the conformities of the past, even the last decade, are just impractical now. Hid hoodies is a good example of this, right? I recently met someone, I can't remember who they were, so if they listen to this podcast and I'm quoting you out of place, I'm very sorry, but they were saying to me, one of the things they can't bear to see on a golf course is players wearing hoodies. And I said, well, you'll hate me then, because I wear them all the time. And that's an example, isn't it, of just how things have changed. So we're in this really weird period at the moment where we've got an established core golfer who has very different views on standards to the newer breed of golfer that comes in. And I don't think that was necessarily true of this core golf group when they were in their 20s and 30s, because I think they had the same ideals as the previous group then.
I think it's really interesting, and I think you've sort of touched on a few things there, but the kind of the idea that there is a way of behaving, there are things that are acceptable and aren't acceptable, is kind of long established in golf. I think perhaps what I want to get into a discussion about, and I don't want to make this a kind of new guard versus old guard kind of binary debate. I think there's something more nuanced in this idea of the death of etiquette than, the youngsters coming into the game just don't get it. They don't understand the golf traditions, etc. I think there's something slightly more to it than that. In that what we're actually seeing is a changing in terms of what good looks like. We've definitely got a change in standards. So the word standards is kind of used quite a lot to say someone's got to keep standards up. So you must wear a collared shirt, you have to keep standards up.
Yeah.
You must tuck your shirt in, you have to keep standards up. And I've for a long, long time, I've always thought this when I see this on the internet, it's like, whose standards? Like, what are you talking about? What are these standards? And I think in trying to prepare for this podcast, I think I sort of hit upon something that certainly brought a lot of clarity to me, in that we're not just seeing a change in standards, we're actually seeing a change in what good etiquette is. So if you ask someone in their 60s or 70s what good etiquette is, you'd get a very different answer than if you asked my 12-year-old or a 25-year-old what they think is an acceptable way to behave socially. Those two things are totally different. I think in terms of the debate around golf club etiquette, that is really, really important.
But do you think that? I mean, I think that I don't want to, as you say, say them and thus, but I think that the core etiquette debate for those frequent and ardent club golfers is the usual. It's no jeans on the golf course. It's repair your pitch marks. It's rake your bunkers. I don't think those things have changed particularly.
Well, I think we can get into the kind of course elements and the safety elements. I think they are a little bit different, and we should discuss that. I think what I'm driving at is this kind of societal change in that etiquette could be described as good form, couldn't it? Like, are you behaving to the expected standards? That's what etiquette used to mean. And that didn't just apply to a golf club environment. I think it used to be expected that you would take your hat off in public, for example. It would be expected that you would kind of give your seat up to someone on a tube. It would be expected that you would wear a suit to go to work in. You would be showing your best side. That's what good form was. It was conforming to a set of societal norms, right? But nowadays, I think that actually society's moved on. Now, good form, it means accepting difference. And you kind of see this in humor, right? In comedy, where once upon a time we could do an impression of someone from a different country, or we could say something that would nowadays be viewed as racist. And those two things are at definite loggerheads with one another. A person making a joke about someone from a different country isn't being racist necessarily. They think they're being funny. But nowadays they would be viewed as racist, because the accepted thing now is that we have to accept difference. And I think that's really, really clarifying when you apply that to a golf course environment where people are going to enjoy their free time. And what people used to do is accept the fact that when they were going to enjoy their free time, they still had to play by the rules. And actually, nowadays, people want to enjoy their free time for exactly that. Like, I've just been to Streamsong in the States, which is populated by lots and lots of wealthy people, but it's got a very relaxed dress code. You definitely allow music on buggies. You can definitely drink on the golf course. You definitely wear your hat inside in the bar, because people have earned their money and they want the right to use their leisure time as they choose to use it. So the question I'm sort of asking is it bad etiquette to be making somebody to conform to your rules and your set of what good looks like in terms of social behaviours? And actually, would it be better etiquette to be more accommodating of people from different walks of life with different ideas about what they want to wear, if it's not affecting you?
Well, I think more than that, the problem is it's become confusing. So if you go back 30 years again, the rules that you're talking about, those strong conforming rules, would have been present in nearly every club that you went into, whether it was private or proprietary. I definitely remember going into proprietary clubs in the mid 90s to late 90s, and it was ostensibly exactly the same environment as a private members club. It was just run for profit instead of run for surplus. Whereas now, you use Streamsong as an example. I mean, I've got loads of these examples where I keep getting undone because I can go to Sanburn, for example. I can just do what I want within reason. Obviously, I need to wear appropriate golf attire on the course, but that's it. Jeans in the clubhouse, trainers in the clubhouse, wear your hat in the clubhouse, take a phone call if you want in the clubhouse. No one will even look at you. And sometimes when I've gone to other establishments, for example, in the high summer, and I've forgotten to take my hat off, because I don't have to take my hat off in any other environment that I go into and play golf, I get undone because someone looks at me and points at me and says, take your hat off, because it's against their rules. So I think, as much as I agree with what you're saying, I think it's fine for, if everyone is happy with that, for clubs to impose their own orders, their own customs, their own stipulations. The problem is that you need to be accommodating when you realise that those standards change depending on where you are. And it's not that necessarily that I'm going into, say, for example, Birkdale's clubhouse with my hat on, and I'm trying to be, part of the counterculture. It's just that I play a lot of my golf in a place where those rules don't apply.
Yeah. Because the accepted norm is different. So if we probably start by defining what we mean by golf etiquette, I think that's probably quite important, so we all understand what we're talking about. And I think we probably already touched on this, that you can kind of split it into two areas, can't you? That there's this idea of the kind of on-course etiquette and things you're doing to the golf course and the way you interact with other players. And then there's the kind of more societal etiquette, which is what you wear and where you wear it and how you behave, basically. So, like, why does etiquette exist in your mind? Like, what's it for? What's its purpose?
Oh, wow. You're going to get me political now. I personally think etiquette's about control. In the same way that you can argue that religion's about control and laws are about control. It's enforcing a set of customs and practices upon people who either want to be members of that club or play at that club. Now, I'm not saying, again, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that that's bad, good or bad. I'm just saying that's what it's there for.
Yeah. I think a lot of the societal stuff is, I don't think I would disagree. And I'm not sure that, I think maybe control is sort of going a step too far, but by having boundaries in terms of what is expected and like what you can wear and where you can wear it, you are effectively navigating through this idea that people are going to arrive with lots of different ideas about what they can wear and what they can't wear it. Yeah. And you're doing that by telling people this is what we're expected to wear. So there aren't arguments down the line.
But it's your version of what's acceptable. And what is it? Who are you, and what are you to say that something else is not acceptable? And that's how we get back to the their club, their rules thing. But I think that's the pivotal part of your conformity versus difference debate. Like, in a nutshell, isn't it?
It is. But I mean, you said it's our club, our rules. I think what people are basically saying is, if you don't want to have an argument here, this is how you're expected to behave. This is what you are and are allowed to do, and what you are and aren't allowed to wear.
Yeah, and if you don't want to accept that, don't play here.
Yeah, it's a little bit like when you go to someone's house and they say wear a shoes off house, right? And in your house, you might just wear shoes wherever you do in my house. And my kids are always sort of very puzzled when people say, "Can you take your shoes off?" But it is that kind of thing, isn't it? Is that in this house, this is how we do things. So I think that is that kind of stuff. But then there are lots of other bits of etiquette. So things like course care or pace of play or safety on the golf course, where etiquette has got a sort of a role to play for everybody, hasn't it? To ensure happiness for everybody. So things like repairing pitch marks, replacing divots, waving slower groups through, shouting for, not driving when the group in front are on a green you can reach. Those are all things that presumably have still got a place, whomever, aren't they? They're just the sort of civil way of carrying on.
Well, it's because they bring a tangible benefit, i.e. you are looking after the course, you're not injuring somebody. You are you are trying to behave in a way that's not going to put other people in a position where they're uncomfortable, I suppose. There is a tangible benefit. I'm not even sure I mean that last bit. There is a tangible benefit to looking after the golf course by repairing pitch marks and raking bunkers. It keeps the golf course in good condition, and it ensures that it's good for people who are following in behind. It allows them to play to the best of their ability without excuse. It is the same in terms of shouting for, not standing in someone's eye line, not distracting them. There is a tangible benefit to that because it improves safety on the golf course. It means people don't get injured. And as someone who's been hit by a golf ball in the head, I'd prefer it not to happen again because, it was painful. So there is a tangible benefit to that. I think where I have no issue with these things, where I have issue in terms of, say, dress code, is there's no tangible benefit to you saying, I don't want you to wear this in the clubhouse. I want you to wear this instead. There's no tangible benefit to that outside of this is what I want to happen.
Finding the right golf equipment doesn't need to be a headache. Whether you're a beginner or professional, Golf Clubs for Cash have equipment suitable for any budget. And if you're shopping online, their new digital club fitter can point you in the right direction in 5 simple steps. Need fast and effective expert advice? Visit golfclubsforcash.co.uk or download their app and browse Digital Club Fitter to find your next set of clubs.
So that is what we're talking about, isn't it? So when we're talking about golf etiquette, I think we're talking about these 2 strands of things. There's this kind of behavioural, sartorial code of conduct, which takes place on the course and off the course. And then there's this kind of course care, safety stream of etiquette, which is something entirely different. And what I think is also weird is that a lot of these things you sort of take for granted because you've kind of learned them almost by osmosis. So growing up as a junior in and around a golf club and in and around people who played the game for a long time, this stuff was just sort of drip fed into you, wasn't it? You kind of, just as you would learn to grip the golf club or swing the golf club, you'd be learning about where to stand and where not to stand. I can remember, I still keep saying this to people now when people are talking about course conditioning, that at the club I grew up at, it was kind of drilled into you that you didn't walk, let alone pull a trolley on the fringe of the green between the green and a bunker. So you'd be told to walk around the back of the bunker, put your bag at the nearest point where you're going to exit the greens to make it easy to pick up on the way to the next tee, and then you'd walk onto the green. And nowadays you see people walking on what are often narrow strips of land between the bunker and the green, and they get worn out and they get into sort of bad condition because of footfall through those areas. That really stands out to me as something that wasn't written down on a bit of paper. That was just something that was de rigueur at the club I grew up at, that everyone just sort of passed on and said, I'll try not to walk between the green and the bunker. And then you just did it automatically. It wasn't like a big deal. You didn't get cross about it because everybody was doing it. And it was just something that you did because you knew it had a benefit to the state of the golf course.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been at clubs where that has been in place. Seems fair enough.
But equally, I reckon I must have been told off more times than anybody else about not tucking their shirt in. And as recently as last week, I was told off twice for having my shirt untucked as a 48-year-old man, believe it or not. And I've definitely been told off for wearing a hat inside. And that's because these things weren't really that much of an issue at the club where I grew up. It was a kind of relatively working class membership. We weren't really bothered about black tie dues and that kind of thing, and it was quite relaxed. Even in the 90s when I grew up playing there, it wasn't an especially formal environment. So I never really came to sort of be that way, if you see what I mean. And a lot of my friends now sort of grew up at much more kind of old money, red trouser, more high profile golf courses, and they were sort of used to taking a change of clothes in their bag put on afterwards, and they were used to having to wear a shirt and tie in certain rooms in the clubhouse. And certainly, wouldn't have had an untucked shirt or a cap on inside, but they were kind of fostered in a different environment.
I just use the example of golf fashion throughout the era. So when people get upset about shirts being left out of their trousers, or people get upset about what is acceptable golf wear now compared to what they would like people to play, I just say to them, well, put your jacket and tie on then, and go play golf like they used to, like I do when I go in Hickory cosplay, right? I wear a tie to play golf, and I wear +4s and I look silly. But standards change and acceptance of standards change. Now, I mean, why does someone run across a fairway to tell someone to tuck their shirt in? Is that about imposing standards, or is that about that guy being a dick who wants to make himself feel good by telling somebody off? Like, which is it? I would argue quite strongly it's the latter.
I can't believe you've sworn on my.
I know I don't really. So, but dress code in particular just gets me cross.
Well, I think it kind of brings me on or back to this sort of point that I want to have a good discussion about, which is this idea about conformity versus acceptance, which I think is kind of what is viewed as good form now versus what was viewed as good form in the past. So I think in days gone by at golf clubs, in other environments, fitting in was viewed as kind of like what was expected, and that would be what was regarded as good form. I think
it's what the interview could be for, wasn't it? Are you the right sort of chap in the old parlance for this golf club? Are you going to be able to fit in with the membership?
100%. And I think, like, if you sort of, as I often do, bring this back to your children, like children would sort of taught about etiquette, weren't they, in schools, and kind of you were taught to talk in received pronunciation, and you would talk. People used to be given deportment lessons, like ways of carrying yourself and how to cross your legs and not to put your elbows on the table when you're eating and all this kind of thing. And that's just like, it's just not a thing anymore. What the kids are told nowadays is you must be accepting. People are all different. Don't poke fun at difference. Accept difference. So the things that are being drilled into children, and this has been the case for several years, are very different now from what they were when we were kids or when our parents were kids.
Yeah.
So I think that there is a massive shift in terms of what good social behavior looks like now versus what it used to look like. So if you think about the example that you use about this guy running across the fairway to tell you to tuck your shirt in or whatever it was, like in the past, that person would have been seen as the sort of savior of etiquette in that club. He wouldn't have been seen as rude. He'd have been seen as someone who was kind of protecting the standards, right? He's a custodian of his club, and he's so bothered that he's traveling across 2 fairways to explain to you that you are doing the wrong thing in terms of the rules at that golf club. But nowadays, he's just seen as rude.
Well, because it's the way that you do it, and it's the motive for doing it. Now, you would say, well, they're upholding the standards of the club. I would say they're not, because having been told off for forgetting to take a hat off, it's the way that it's done, and it's the rudeness with which it's done. It's not you know what, I'm sorry about this, but you need to take your hat off in here. It's get your cap off now. Or it's not, I'm sorry, but your shirt has come out of your trousers here. Can you please tuck it in? That's what we ask for on this golf course. It's, you're going around this golf course without your shirt tucked in. Get it tucked in now. Now, what is that about? Is that about protecting standards? Is it about that person then being able to go back to his mates with his chest puffed out and say, look what I told him, didn't I? That's not about protected standards. It's about making that person feel good about themselves.
See, I understand what you're saying, and I understand that kind of delivery is everything in these scenarios. And actually, the 2 people who told me to tuck my shirt in last week were perfectly polite about it. And the second guy actually he said, well, just at least tuck it in whilst I can see, and I don't really care. And was very sort of human about it.
See no evil, hear no evil.
But what I'm not sure you're quite correct in terms of what you're saying, because I think that is your interpretation more than anything of what you're being told. And that, I think, is kind of what I'm driving at, in the sense that I think if you were told in the 90s, you were a younger man, you probably would have been happier to have been kind of ticked off, or you'd have been more used to being ticked off. As you sort of reach middle age, you much more.
I don't know. I'm an absolute conflict avoider right now, Tom. I just go, yes, please, 3 bags full.
Yeah, but you bristle more, okay, but you definitely bristle more in your 40s when someone tells you to take a cap off than you do when you're 17.
Everyone's hard when they're on their own.
Yeah, because you're just not used to being told. But I think more what is happening is that you would have been embarrassed in the 90s if someone came to you and said, can you tuck your shirt in? Can you take your hat off? Can you put your phone down? Actually, someone put your phone down, you'd been like from the future, but you take my point. You'd have been embarrassed because you thought, of course, it's on me. I'm in your house. I'm at your club. Of course, I should be behaving in the way that you expect me to behave. How rude of me to not do that. And now I think people say, well, hang on a minute, who are you to tell me what to wear and where I can wear it? And it's actually the person doing the telling that is viewed as rude. So I think that society has shifted to being, they value tolerance over conformity, basically. And I think that is the conflict that you see in golf clubs.
Yeah, I would say there's something in that, definitely.
So I think I'm really glad I've sort of managed to get that out, because that was sort of the nub of what I wanted to say, basically, about how I think what good etiquette is has potentially moved, and actually nowadays maybe in some cases being tolerant matters over and above everything else. But there are some things that still matter, I think, in terms of golf course etiquette. There are like certain non-negotiables, basically, in terms of how you should be behaving at golf clubs, and they mainly relate to things like course care and safety, don't they? So I don't know whether if you would sort of prioritize anything particularly in terms of like, if you were meeting a total beginner tomorrow who said, like, can you just tell me some things that I've got my first round of golf tomorrow, what matters? Like, what do I need to know? What would you tell them?
Pitch marks, bunkers, divots, straight away. I mean, I think you can get in. I think when you talk about right place to stand, right place to be, not being distracting, that sort of stuff is quite difficult to describe unless you're actually on site with someone. It's much easier to explain that to them when you're actually there. You're behind me, so I can see you in your eye line. Would you mind just standing to the side? If that's something that bothers you, it doesn't particularly bother me. But it's don't stand here because you might get hit if I shank the golf ball. That's something that's quite hard, I think, to explain unless you do it in practice. Whereas pitch marks, bunkers, rakes, divots, it's pretty easy. That's pretty easy. And yet they're the things that I think, when you talk about decline in standards, right, I'll rant on about dress codes because I'm pretty progressive and I'm a lefty liberal and all that sort of stuff. And I'm very much of the wear what you want. And I understand that people will disagree with that, and each to their own. But when it comes to things like pitch marks, divots, bunker raking, they have practical implications on the way that people play their golf. Not only for greenkeepers who have to repair them and then can't repair them properly if they're not done within a certain time, but if you land in a footprint, and I've landed in deep footprints from people who haven't raked bunkers, that has a material effect on your score. So they're the first three things that I would say to people, first 3 or 4 things anyway. Get these sorted out and you'll always be on the right track. And there has absolutely been a decline in all of those things. I mean, I go to some pretty nice places, so do you. I could take a picture at lots of them of, just footprints in bunkers. I don't know when people just decided, I can't be arsed, someone else will do it. But it definitely happens. And it's always happened, in fact. I mean, but it was always blamed on visitors. And then obviously COVID came along and sort of swept that myth away. But it's definitely worse. The greenkeepers can do a great job setting up a tournament for, setting up a golf course for a day's tournament. And I can roll on at 8:30 and there can be footprints in bunkers all over the place and pitch marks all over the place. Pitch marks are a difficult one because I appreciate that sometimes people can miss them. You can have a look around for one, your ball can bounce somewhere and end up somewhere else and you just can't find it. That's where if you can't replace yours, if you can't fix yours, fix another comes from, isn't it? So at least you're sort of doing the husbandry around the golf course. But these things have all got like way, way worse in the last couple of years. Maybe I've just become an old man about it. I don't know. Or maybe I'm just looking for it more because it's an easy social media pick. Look at this disgrace of a bunker. But it just feels to me like it's got a lot worse. And some of that is definitely because take my money and you remember.
Well, I think there's loads of things feeding into it. I think that, like, as a very practical example, like they've recently changed the rules so you can repair pitch marks on your, you've always been able to repair pitch marks, but you can now basically repair spike marks and stuff on the line of your putt. And I think that all feeds into, well, there's not really any point in me repairing this pitch mark because people can just do it later, right? So it's kind of like there's been a kind of softening of things across the board, which I think sort of feeds into all of that stuff.
I think, Tom, sorry, Tom, to interrupt. I think a bit of it is someone else will fix that.
Yeah.
It's not my job to do it. Someone else will do it. That's what these people are employed for.
Yeah. I think that the idea of letting slower groups through is interesting, because when we grew up, you used to get told that was like a massive thing. If you were 3-ball and there's 2-ball behind you, you just let them through. That was just standard. And then somewhere along the way, that kind of like got softened to if you're not keeping pace with the group in front. I think that's a different thing because you should always be letting faster groups through. That's what we got told. And the other side of that is that we also got told that single players had no standing. So you just never let a 1-ball through because they didn't have any standing on the golf course. But I think broadly speaking, that these things that we're talking about, letting people through, shouting for, repairing divots, repairing pitch marks, these are all things that are non-negotiables, right? And then you have this kind of contextual etiquette part of music and dress codes and the type of language that you're using, that if it's not affecting someone else, and I struggle to see how what you're wearing is affecting someone else, then perhaps that is when the kind of acceptance side of etiquette becomes more important than enforcing someone wearing a collar. Over the years, I have definitely done some bad etiquette. I've definitely witnessed some bad etiquette. And a lot of the time it is linked to my perception of it. I can remember really clearly being at a course in Scotland where there was a foursomes club match behind us, right? We were a 4-ball visitors. So this foursomes is moving really quickly. And it's moving so quickly that we've had no opportunity to let it play through because it kind of caught us up all in a hurry. And then we all arrived on the next tee together. And we definitely would have allowed these people to play through, but the people who were teeing off in this foursome literally just marched onto the back tee and said, we're playing a club match, and hit the balls without even looking us in the eye, without even acknowledging us. And that is because it is form at golf clubs that if there's a club match and you're a faster moving group, you just play through. But the behaviour itself was really rude. So I think there are definitely occasions where actually what is perceived to be normal in terms of the behaviour is actually not that great in terms of how polite it is.
What's the worst thing you've done then?
Me? Well, I hit someone on the head once with a golf ball when I was a kid. I'm not sure if that was bad etiquette or just sort of not knowing.
It's not deliberate, is it?
I guess that does sort of feed into this sort of newer player thing, because at the time I was sort of 14 or 15. I was playing on my own. I was trying to get some holes in for going on a family holiday when there's going to be no golf. I was rushing. And the group in front where I was sort of telling myself they were out of range, but actually there was a lady pulling a trolley in the right-hand rough. I hit a slice off this tee and one bounce, the ball hit her on the side of the head. And it was terrible etiquette because I should have let her get well clear, and I definitely should have shouted for. I did neither of those things, but it was more because I didn't know. And I wonder if quite a lot of the stuff we're talking about in terms of the death of etiquette is just because people don't know.
Do you want to know the worst thing I did?
Yeah.
It's not that long ago, actually, to my shame. It was accidental, but it was pretty bad form. I was refereeing, and I had to get from one place to another. I'm not going to say where this was because it'll just give the game away, and it'll reveal how bad it actually was. But I had to get from one place to another, so I circled through my buggy, and I thought that a player had taken their shot. So I whizzed past on my buggy, but the person hadn't taken their shot, and they hit their shot as I whizzed past on the buggy.
Huh?
And it was in a tournament that mattered as well.
I'll tell you what I did.
I felt terrible about it. I mean, it wasn't. It was in no way on purpose. So it's not. There's no intent, but it's bad.
You've just reminded me actually on the buggy hitting thing. So I was playing at Costa Navarino in Greece. In a pro-am called the Aegean and Messina Pro-am, which is the Confederations of Professional Golfers of Europe. And they have this big sort of end of season thing down there every year. And I used to get invited, now I don't. Maybe this is why. And the pace of play is horrific, right? Because it's a load of people who are playing and pros playing who are taking it too seriously. And the golf courses are quite windy and narrow and pretty tricky. And I was playing with this lovely TaylorMade ambassador called Veronica, who is, she's a teaching pro, basically spends her winters, Swedish teaching pro, spends her winters traveling around Dubai, Mauritius, Greece, etc. to teach golf. So she's our host, and I'm with two other members of the media, one of which is a French guy who does a lot of the golf TV in France. And we were waiting on this dog leg for absolutely ages. And in the end, he just got bored. And as the group were leaving the green, he hit his hybrid from about 180 at one bounce, hit this buggy. Right. And then we all waited for them to get well clear and hit our shots in. And then we were sort of saying to him, what are you going to do? You need to go and apologise. You need to go and apologise. And he said, not like buff, basically, the most French thing ever. And then later on, we found a head cover and we caught up with this group on the 17th tee. It was a par 3. And I was thinking, this is going to be awkward. But it's definitely his opportunity to go and apologise. He can take the head cover back and he can go and say sorry. And I gave him the head cover and said, this is your chance, go and do it. And he just flatly refused because he was so cross about how slow it was that he thought he was perfectly within his rights to have hit this shot. Anyway, we're at the gala dinner that night. My mate is on the top table with the guy who owns the resort, and he's texting me going, did your group hit a buggy earlier on? I was like, yeah, but it wasn't me. It was this French guy. And he goes, that's the guy who owns the resort. So this French guy was there on like a commission to like make a film about the resort, and he whacked it into the bloke basically paid his bill. It's a brilliant story, isn't it?
It's a pretty good one. It's a pretty good one. I've talked in a few backswings in my time. Again, accidentally just not paying attention. That's pretty bad. Then you feel terrible when someone whiffs a shot. I have been responsible for the odd whiff.
Yeah. So I think like we joke about this, and there are obviously sort of amusing incidents of being told off by old people and hitting balls into one another and all the rest of it. And I once actually scuffed the green, having missed a putt on Club Championship day at Old Woodley, and took a massive divot right out by the hole. It's absolutely terrible, isn't it?
Oh no! Gosh, that's like kick you out of the club sort of stuff.
People coming in and saying, "Who on earth did that?" And I was like, "I don't know. It's there when I got there." Awful. So, but a lot of this is like, I think it is important because we've got this sort of boom in golf participation. You do wonder whether these two different versions of respect that we have described, kind of whether they can coexist or not. But I think as we've discussed it, I think something's come out of this discussion in that is it just a lack of shared expectation? Is that the problem? Like, I think that this idea that we grew up kind of being immersed in golf and kind of learning like this kind of what's de rigueur, but almost by osmosis, newer players don't really have that because they just don't know. And no one wants to do the wrong thing, do they? No one wants to cause offense. No one wants to have an argument with someone. Everyone wants to be having a nice time. So I think there's an element of just like a kind of almost like a lack of education, a lack of kind of knowledge about what good looks like certainly from an on-course etiquette point of view.
There's ways and means. I have to occasionally inform somebody about a particular aspect of the rules of golf, and there's a way of doing it, and there's a way of doing this. You don't have to, as I said earlier, you don't have to steam across 2 fairways with your blood up. You can just say, you can be nice. You can just say, at this club, we have an etiquette rule in place where you tuck your shirt into your trousers, and most of the time, if you do it in that way, people will go, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know."
Yeah, and I also think it's important to say that there's room for all of this stuff, isn't there? Like there is massively room for hoodies and T-shirts with no collar and cargo shorts and Bluetooth speakers and beers on the golf course and all of that stuff. That is like all massively part of modern golf. But there is still definitely room for walking your dog in your red trousers, putting your shirt and tie on, having a cummel when you're finished. There's no reason why these things can't coexist. There's like a richness to that diversity, isn't there? In that if everybody was turning up at Old Woodley wearing hoodies and baggy trousers, it'd be weird. So I think you have to settle on the fact that good etiquette is basically an acceptance of difference.
Yeah, well, where I have a point of difference with it is when that is used to embarrass. If it's used to help, if it's used to inform, if it's used to some tangible benefit, as I said earlier, then fine. I don't have a particular issue with it.
for the life of me, I don't understand what difference it makes whether socks are knee high or ankle high, red, white, green, blue, or what. It doesn't matter to me whether a pair of shorts has an extra pocket on the outside than not. Tell me what difference that makes to your club. But people say it's a slippery slope from there to people going bare chested and swilling beers and chucking them all over themselves. And I'm like, no, it really isn't.
Here's a good one for you that actually we should use as the picture when we publish this, right? So Mike Robertson absolutely loves Trad Golf Club. He likes nothing more than going to St. Ports or Rye or Roy Wellington and Newmarket or wherever else and getting like the branded merch. And he's got a particular penchant for long socks. He absolutely loves it. So he's got some old Woodley long socks, believe it or not. He's also got tattoos, right? Which like he's covered in them. So when we're in America, where he's having to wear shorts, he decided that the lesser of the two evils was to, instead of showing everybody that he's got tattoos all over his calves, was to wear like kind of American style shorts with old Woodley long socks. So there's all these pictures of him in service stations wearing like, just looking preposterous, basically, looking like some rugby player who's lost his ball in petrol stations just because he was too embarrassed about his tattoos. So I don't know where that sits in this whole etiquette debate, but he was so desperate not to cause offence by having his tattoos on show but he was quite happy to look like an absolute plonker in his long socks.
Well, why should he have had to do that? His tattoos belong to him. As long as they're not, as long as they're not showing any symbols, for example, that are illegal and so on. What difference does it make? And that's the point I was trying to make. He's had to then bend his behaviour into something that's made him uncomfortable for something that shouldn't have been anyone else's business apart from his.
Yeah. Right. Let's leave it there. So I think there's quite a lot to sort of chew over there. Hopefully quite a bit to think about. I think it'd be interesting to hear from you whether it's one rule you'd protect, one thing you'd get rid of altogether. Would be an interesting thing to hear from you on. I'm sure we'll get lots of comments on etiquette and the lowering of standards on social media, and long may it continue. Next week, I think we're going to have a look at our membership survey results. So alongside our WHS survey, we also ran a survey on the cost of membership, your plans or lack of plans to renew either this January or in April coming up, what you value you're seeing your membership, and we're going to get stuck into the results of that. Do give us a follow on wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Tom.